Very good afternoon. I am Ankur Chaudhary from hitbullseye.com, and of course a very warm welcome to all of you in this GDPI content session on basics of Indian economy. Now, I hope you all are studying very well. You're over the tiredness of the exam seasons and you are ready to take on the next challenge, that is GD and PI. Right, so the basic concept behind these series of lectures is to give you a brief idea of what all is going around as far as Indian economy and certain political issues, social issues are concerned. So what you will be having are a series of 6 lectures, and this is one on basics of Indian economy. So I do hope that you have your pen and paper ready at hand. I'll be scribbling down a lot of stuff, giving you a lot of information beyond what is given in the presentation and the handouts that you will have. So please make sure you have your pen and paper ready at hand. Also, another thing, as far as the handout of this particular presentation is concerned, those are available in your inbox article tab in your app. So here we go, basics of Indian economy. So let's start with the very basics. Economics is the science which studies human behavior. So let us underline the important aspects. It is a science, of course. It studies human behavior and is a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. So first of all, it is an academic discipline, it is a science or an art, that is a debate which is out of our purview, of course. Most importantly, it studies human behavior. So there is an element of subjectivity as far as economics is concerned. It is concerned with the relationship between ends, that is your goals or the society's goals, and the ways that you reach those goals, that is the means. Of course, we study economics because these means, that is how we reach our goals, these are always limited and not unlimited otherwise. Also, there is an element of prioritization as far as these scarce resources are concerned. So these resources have a large number of alternative uses, right? And the decision making as far as economics is concerned is related to prioritization of their use. Now, talking about the central concerns or central problems of economics. First of all, we spoke about earlier the problem of allocation of resources. Now, these resources might be economic resources in terms of capital, the money that we have. They might be natural resources, of course, precious metals, coal, natural gas, etc. And also, and very importantly, one resource is human resources. The second major problem or second major concern of economics, of course, is the problem of fuller utilization of resources. So what we are really targeting at is efficient and the best use of scarce resources that we already have. Next, of course, is we do have resources at our hands, at our disposal. We utilize them, and also what we want to do is utilize the existing resources to enhance the amount of resources available to us. Now, of course, when you talk about natural resources like coal, gas, etc., we cannot actually make them grow. However, when you talk about other resources like capital or in fact human resources, these are resources that we have in our hands, and we can, if we are efficiently utilizing them, then possibly we can see some growth in this. So this is also concerned about economics. Satyaki, I think there's a problem at your end. I believe I'm audible to everyone else. So do check your sound setup. So moving on to forms of economic systems. Now there are different ways in which we can utilize the resources to the best of our abilities. There are different philosophies and there are different ideologies behind them. So this is something that we will be discussing in the subsequent slides. So the first economic system that we'll discuss is capitalism. It is one of the most popular ones today. It is one of the oldest ones that we have in practice, and these are certain basic features of capitalism. The characteristic or the principal feature, of course, is right to private property. Now, of course, when you talk about capitalism, everything is privately owned. So for a car, you can say this car belongs to someone. As far as a business or a factory is concerned, that business is registered in a particular individual's name. There is no government intervention in the capitalist system. For example, so as far as government intervention goes, the government does not interfere as far as prices of commodities are concerned, how much commodities are being produced, or what kind of commodities can be consumed. These decisions, these critical decisions for the economy, are taken by private producers and consumers themselves. Okay, next important instruction for you. This is a 1.5 hour session. So after every half an hour, let us have a question session. Because if you guys keep asking me questions in the middle of the lecture, then we won't ever get to the end of it. So just remind me after a half an hour, we'll have a quick 5 or 7 minutes question and answer session. Next, of course, in the capitalist system, there is a free hand given to market forces, that is demand and supply. So whatever the producers, the manufacturers want to produce, they will produce. Government will not instruct them on what to produce or intervene in their decision making. And also, what I as an individual buyer or a consumer, what I want to buy, I will be allowed to buy, of course, with the restrictions of laws. The second point is similar to the previous one, freedom of choice in production and consumption. Again, there is no level of government intervention in these cases. Lastly, and very importantly, there is the public sector as such does not exist in a capitalist society. So there will be no companies which are owned by the state or by the government. Now, when you talk about the merits and demerits of such a system, of course, most of you can imagine, as far as merits is concerned, firstly, such a system will establish a meritocratic society. So only the peoples who are very good, talented, skilled and hardworking will be able to make profits, and other people not so much. Second merit of capitalism, of course, using this system, an economy can register very high levels of growth. So when you talk about the demerits of this particular system, that is capitalism. Now, since the basic motive of capitalist society or capitalist or business owners rather is profit maximization, in order to increase their profits, these business owners might start exploiting their workers or the labor class, right? So they might do this by reducing their wages to the bare minimum or making them work for extraordinarily very high number of hours, right? So exploitation of the poor people or the labor class. The second major demerit, of course, is that a capitalist system leads to permanence or perpetuation of poverty. So whoever is in fact poor in a capitalist society, he has lesser opportunities to become rich, and the rich person will always tend to become richer. So the gap between rich people and the poor people will continue to rise if there is no government intervention. Again, similar, the third demerit of capitalism, of course, is that there is no scope of social welfare, as the public sector does not exist in such economies, right? So there are no government schools, there are no government hospitals, everything is privately owned. So you can imagine the poor people of the society will not be getting or may not be able to afford services from these institutions. Guys, you'll have to give me 1 minute. I'll just be right back. Yeah, sorry for the interruption. The next economic system that we'll be talking about is socialism. So it is socialism is an economic system that advocates complete or absolute state ownership, control and organization of the means of production and distribution. So this is entirely opposite to the capitalist society. Everything in which everything is privately owned. So in socialism, everything, a factory, land, agricultural land, any asset, etc. is collectively owned or owned by the state. Now, socialist society is a centrally governed society. In this, all the decisions, all the major decisions of the economy are taken by the central government of a particular economy or a state. And as such, the economy is planned. So you will see the concept of 5-year plans, 10-year plans, etc. There is a huge amount of restriction on market forces. So people are not actually free to produce whatever they want to, or in fact consume whatever they want to. Again, as we already understand, there is absolutely no room for existence of private property or the private sector in a socialist economy. So when you talk about the merits of such a society, of course, the demerit of capitalist society, that is exploitation of labor and the poor class, that will be entirely removed, because everything is owned by the state, and state is expected to take care of all the needs of the poor sections of the society. Another advantage is that of social welfare. So as far as socialist societies or economies are concerned, social welfare, that is upliftment of deprived sections of the society, this is something that will be taken care of, because everything is in fact owned by the government. Of course, when you talk about the demerits of a socialist society, since the power is concentrated in the central government, then there is a high propensity of corruption to be creeping up in the system. Secondly, of course, such an economy, because it is taking care of every single person in the society, it is very unlikely that such an economy will register a high economic growth. Of course, since everyone is treated equally, skills and talented are not really appreciated in such an economy, then it will act like a disincentive for the population, and it is likely that there is no incentive for them to work hard for greater profits. So the next type of economy is a mixed economy. It is a compromise between capitalism and socialism. So it takes the merits of capitalism and combines them with the merits of socialism in trying to minimize the demerits of both. So of course, India is a mixed economy, so we also see these features in our economy as well. So we have a coexistence of public and private sector. So in telecom you have BSNL and Vodafone. In civil aviation you have Air India and other private airlines like Jet Airways, and so on and so forth. Now, as far as productive resources are concerned, the same resources that we talked about earlier, both private sector and the state own them. The government tries to intervene in the least possible manner in production or the functioning of the private sector. However, in certain special cases, certain critical areas, government does intervene. For example, price regulation. And the case that we can, or the example that we can speak about here, is the concept of MSP, that is minimum support price. So the government at the beginning of each harvest season says, let us say, the MSP of wheat is rupees 1500 per quintal. So if a farmer is not able to sell his supply of wheat, then the government promises that it will purchase this wheat or his produce at this particular rate. This is done so that farmers have an incentive to produce more and more, and they should not suffer for a bumper harvest, because a bumper harvest will in fact lead to fall in or a crash in prices in a simple capitalist society. So there is in fact government intervention as far as price regulation is concerned, and also when you talk about income distribution. Over here we can talk about subsidies. Government gives a lot of subsidies in three broad categories: food, fuel and fertilizers. right? And these subsidies are targeted at the poor people or vulnerable sections of the society like SCs, STs and poor farmers. So government will intervene in income distribution as well. Now when you talk about economic growth, of course the government gives a free hand to the private sector. It is allowed to grow at its own pace, make its own decisions, and also development. Now, in this case, government will take care of certain deprived sections of the society or certain areas, for example, which are remote. So it is only the government of India or the state government which will establish a school in a small village of Bihar, and the government does not expect the private sector to be contributing over there. So wherever it is needed, the government will intervene to ensure development of the nation. Moving on to the certain conceptual parts of studying an economy. So how is the health or the performance of an economy measured? First concept, of course, is GDP or gross domestic product. So it is the sum total of the values of all final goods and services produced within the geographical territory. I'm only writing the keywords here. Produced within the geographical territory of an economy for a given period of time. The sum total of values of final goods and services produced within the geographical territory of an economy of a country within a specific period of time. So when you talk about final goods, we talk about the goods as they are consumed by the end consumer. So if you're calculating the value of an automobile, you will not take the values separately of the steering wheel or the seat or the engine. You will take the final value of the car as it is being used by the end consumer like us. It is a geographical or a territorial concept. So if an American company or a company from UK is setting up shop in India and producing, the value of its goods will be added in the GDP of our country. As far as time is concerned, the GDP is measured usually in a period of 1 year. Next is a concept that is net domestic product. So this is nothing but GDP minus depreciation. Most of you must be knowing depreciation is an accounting term, and it is referred to as the reduction in the accounting value of an asset due to wear and tear. Next we have a concept that is gross national product. The key word here is national. So this is based on nationality as opposed to GDP, which is based on territory. So the value of goods and services produced by Indians who are working abroad is added to the GDP, and then the value of the foreigners who are working in India is subtracted. That's how you obtain gross national product. So next is a term that is net national product. Of course, this is nothing but GNP minus depreciation. So I think half an hour, we are already into half an hour in this session. So any questions that you ask? So Divya has asked the merits of mixed economy, right? Divya, so the merits of mixed economy is a combination of socialism and capitalism, and as far as demerits is concerned, it is the same story. So wherever the government intervenes a lot, there is a propensity of corruption that we are seeing around us everywhere. So wherever the private sector is strong, it is expected that it is believed that it will lead to exploitation of people. For example, if a private company wants to set up a hydropower plant in a state like, let us say, Himachal Pradesh, it is likely that it will not take care of the needs of the people who are living there and the people who might need to be migrated out of the state. Abhimanyu, China is a very unique example. Politically, as far as the political system is concerned, they are still socialist because there is only one single party in China. There is a single party rule, right? However, when you talk about economically, they are capitalist. They have moved towards capitalism, or they introduced economic reforms to have capitalism since in the year 1978. Rishi, when you talk about the economies or the economic systems that we have spoken about, they usually lie on a single continuum. At one end is capitalism and the other it is socialism, and somewhere in the middle of course is the mixed economies. So when you talk about ideally or economies which are absolutely capitalist, there are no such economies that exist right now. And when you talk about economies which are absolutely socialist, again there is a similar story. However, what you can do is, if this is the central point, if this is the central point of this continuum, there are certain economies which lie more towards capitalism, like USA. Okay, and there are certain economies which are lying more towards socialism, for example, Cuba. And if you talk about India, on this continuum, perhaps you can categorize us somewhere over here. So there is no there is no absolute capitalist economies and no absolute socialist economies. Mandeep will be covering standard of living in some time. Amrit, communism is a very broad-based term which includes political aspects as well, right? And socialism is more concerned about economies. Khushbu, there is no concept like best economy. Of course, you understand that. Abhimanyu, national income we refer to as net national product. When you talk about national income, that is the NNP. Okay guys, let's move on. Over here in this slide, I'll be giving you some data. Of course, this data, I'm sure some of you are getting scared of looking at this data. But however, if you do try to remember this data and quote them in a GD or a PI, it will be very helpful as far as your score is concerned. So do try to remember or memorize certain basic data of Indian economy. So of course, India, as you know, is an emerging economy. So when you talk about nominal GDP, we are ranked 7th in the world. And the top economy as far as nominal GDP is concerned is USA. However, when you talk about GDP calculated at PPP, India ranks 3rd. And in this case, China tops, followed by USA, and then of course we have India. So the next question, I'm sure that is in your mind. This is the latest data, Rishi. Again, limit your questions to the next at the end of this particular half an hour. GDP at purchasing power parity. Now PPP is a concept which is used to equalize the different cost of livings in different countries. Of course, USA, you must have heard, is a more expensive country, or the cost of living in USA is slightly high, right, as compared to India. So PPP is nothing, it is a statistical measure which equalizes this difference created due to cost of living. So for example, currently $1 equals approximately 70 rupees. So if you want to, so as an illustration, if you go to a McDonald's in India with 70 bucks, I'm sure you can buy a couple of things and have a decent meal or a snack out of it. However, if you go to USA, a McDonald's in USA for $1, it is unlikely that you will be able to buy similar things as you did in India. So this difference is created, of course, due to different costs of living. This difference is removed when you talk about GDP at PPP. Again, when you talk about GDP per capita in terms of PPP, it is higher. India recently has overtaken China in terms of the rate of growth. So that is a huge news. If you're able to quote this in any GDP, well, good marks for you. As far as unemployment rate is concerned, we are hovering around 5%. We have managed to reduce it considerably over the past 10 or 15 years, when it used to be around 10 or 12%. Now you will find a large number of figures as far as population below poverty line. So World Bank over here has quoted that India has 21.3% people who are below the poverty line. As far as the last census or Tendulkar committee report is concerned, the figure was 21.9%. Right now, another report has come which is saying 29%. So this is the 21.9% is the last official authentic figure as far as poverty ratio in India is concerned. If you have to quote, then you quote this particular figure. Again, let's talk about exports and imports. Of course, India is a net importing economy. You can see it from this figure, right? So we have a huge trade deficit. This is mainly because our biggest imports are oil and natural gas, in which case we are importing more than 70% of our annual need for natural gas and petroleum, right? So this really inflates our import bill. Export bill, we are lacking in a lot of high value products like engineered products. So over here, that is why our exports tend to remain on a lower side. Now take a careful look at the table in front of you. Siddharth, I'm not sure if you've joined us right now. I'll take questions at 3 p.m. So let us have a brief comparison of Indian economies of India, USA and China. The first row, of course, gives you percentage of GDP, contribution of agriculture, industry and services, and then percentage of population that is engaged in these three sectors of our economy. As you can see, there are some glaring imbalances as far as Indian agriculture is concerned. So almost 50% of our population is engaged in agriculture, but they are producing only 18.7% of the economic output, right? So this is a huge problem that the Indian economy is facing. A large number of people contributing very little to the economy. However, the scene is opposite as far as services sector is concerned. So over here, around 27% of the people contributing to 50% in the economy, right? Again, another problem that you see, the largest group of people are engaged in agriculture. Now this is a huge problem for us because agriculture itself is a low productive activity. The profits that you can hope to earn from agriculture are considerably less when you compare it with industries and services. So what we are essentially targeting is shifting this excess population into industry. Now, another question that you might ask, why only industry and why not services? Well, because industry is, or manufacturing sector is employee intensive. Employee intensive. What this means is the manufacturing sector needs all kinds of labor which are skilled, unskilled or semi-skilled. So industries will absorb all kind of labors, and the number of number of jobs that the industrial sector can provide is considerably high when you compare it to services. So when you talk about services itself, it is only suitable for highly skilled people. So if you think about software industry in India, only highly skilled and highly educated people can hope to enter this particular sector. So that is why we are really focusing on industry. Now let us take a look at China. Of course, China is considered to be the manufacturing hub of the world or the factory of the world. So it is a considerable part of its economy is formed by the industry or the manufacturing sector. Similarly, services sector is also highly developed. Again, when you talk about China, it is not a developed economy as such. It is a developing or an emerging economy. So over here also, considerably large number of people are still employed in agriculture. Now USA, I've deliberately taken USA as a comparison because USA is a fully developed economy. So over here, if you observe these figures, these are almost equal. So the number of people employed in each sector is contributing almost equally to the economy as such, right? Okay. Now the data in the previous slide was updated. This is a particular table. This has slightly outdated data, but it is useful when we are comparing these three economies. Of course, when you take a look at here, we are import dependent and surprised. Perhaps some of you are surprised. How come USA is importing so much as compared to its exports? It's supposed to be a developed economy. So still, why is it so dependent on exports? And the answer you will find in the previous slide. As far as services sector is concerned, a large number of a huge proportion of its population, that is 80%, is engaged in services, and very less, that is 18.4%, is engaged in manufacturing sector. So most of what is USA importing is manufactured goods like automobiles, etc. Yeah. So next, what we'll talk about are basic features of Indian economy. Almost, I'm sure most of you already know these features. Low per capita income. Yes. A large proportion of our population is below poverty line, and it does bring down the average per capita income in the country. There are huge inequalities in income distribution. So the top 10% of the top 10% richest Indians own 75% of the economic resources. So there are huge imbalances in income distribution. So we have a rapidly growing population. As far as figures for 2001-11 census, this period is concerned, our population grew by almost 17%. So every year we had a population equivalent to the population of Australia. There is low rate of capital formation. Now India has been capital starved or capital poor ever since our independence from the Britishers. So that is why we keep on looking at foreign countries to bring in more FDIs or foreign direct investments in our nation. So we have a dualistic nature of economy. So in every sector of the economy, you will see that there are modern industries as well, and there are traditional industries as well. So if you talk about agriculture, the richer farmers of Punjab, Haryana, Western UP are using modern techniques of agriculture. However, if you compare them with poorer farmers of, let us say, Telangana or Vidarbha, these people are poor and continue to use traditional methods of agriculture. Again, we've already discussed that India is a mixed economy and follows the concepts of or philosophy of capitalism as well as socialism. Now, when we attained independence, we were highly influenced by the economy of USSR. USSR, of course, adopted a socialist economy, and our political leaders tried to emulate this in India. So we borrowed this idea of economic planning or centralized planning from the erstwhile USSR. However, one key difference was the planning in India was indicative and not imperative. So whatever the targets were given, they were mainly guidelines and they were not really target-based growth. It was imperative in case of USSR. So Planning Commission was an organization which was critical in economic planning in India. It was established in 1950, and its key job was to create or formulate 5-year plans for social and economic development in the country. Now currently we are in the 12th 5-year plan period. This particular plan started, of course, in the year 2012 and will go on till 2017. So again, these are certain figures that you must try and memorize, try and quote them. What exactly are political leadership, or where exactly are we headed to, or what are our targets? So agriculture growth, we are targeting a growth rate of 4% per annum. This is related to what I said earlier. Agriculture is a very low productivity activity, right? So that is why 4%, it does not sound so much. However, for agriculture, when we talk about agriculture, it is a decent enough target. Industrial growth, Again, it is a high productive sector. So 10% per annum is something that we are aiming at in the 12th five-year plan. And this is most important aspect of the 12th five-year plan. We need more than $1 trillion investment in infrastructure. This includes roads, railways, telecommunications, shipping, etc. Also, more critically, that is power. So India is a power-starved nation. So we need more than $1 trillion to finance our infrastructure or growing infrastructure needs. Again, we need greater focus on health and education. Divya, the 12th five-year plan has not been scrapped, even though the Planning Commission has been done away with. Again, we continue to plan for better targeting of subsidies and bring down the poverty ratio by 10%. So we had 21.9%. We want to reduce it to 11.9%. Now this is an interesting scheme or a very important scheme that has been launched by the government in 2013. That is direct cash transfer or direct benefits transfer. Now I'm sure most of you are already familiar with it because we've already started getting LPG subsidies under this particular scheme. So what the government does, what the government used to do earlier, let us say in case of LPG, we would buy LPG from certain shops at the subsidized price. So let us say the market price of an LPG cylinder used to be 600 bucks. So you go to a shop, go to a agency rather, and you would purchase it by at 400 rupees. The balance 200 rupees, the government would transfer to the agency, gas agency. Now this particular system was creating huge problems as far as corruption is concerned. So there was large amount of pilferages or leakages from these particular subsidized agencies. Now in order to remove these practices, do away with these practices, this particular scheme was launched. So the 200 rupees which previously the government would pay to the LPG agency, now the government, what it does is transfers it directly to your accounts. So this particular scheme has been started as far as LPG is concerned all India level. However, the government plans to expand its scope to include all kinds of transfers that the government does to people. For example, scholarships, disaster relief, your Manrega wages, etc. Okay, let's have that question and answer session right now before we move on. Yes, any questions? Mandeep, as far as your first statement is concerned, per capita income is not the best indicator of economic development. Economic development includes a large number of other factors also, like how equal the society is health and education facilities, are they being given to all sections of the society? Are the poor people also enjoying the benefits of very high quality health and education services? Right? So as far as increase in per capita income is concerned, of course the government is continuously working towards increasing the economic output by providing better infrastructure, by creating more jobs and investing more in social welfare projects. When we talked about dualistic nature of the society, there are still a lot of industries in which modern and traditional practices coexist or work in parallel. Right? So when you talk about agriculture, you have rich farmers who are using imported tractors, right? And also poor farmers who are still using cattle in agriculture. Yes, any other question? Siddharth, I believe I explained this difference earlier. I think you joined the session much later. Yes, any other questions? Okay, moving on. So broadly speaking, there are three sectors of an economy. Yes, Satyaki. Okay, moving on. So there are three major broad sectors in which, three broad categories in which an economy can be divided. First of all, of course, is the primary sector. This involves industries which are related to harvesting of naturally occurring resources. Of course, it includes agriculture, mining, quarrying, etc. Next is the secondary sector. This involves the manufacturing sector, that is involves processing of primary sector goods. Lastly, we have the tertiary sector, that involves services sector. Again, this includes banking services, insurance services, etc. Now, one common phenomena that we have seen across development of economies the world over, when the economy is less developed, the primary sector continues to be the dominant force in the economy. As far as the economy develops and becomes a developing economy, slowly but surely, the secondary sector or the manufacturing sector dominates the economy. And as we saw in the case of USA, which is a developed economy, tertiary sector tends to become more dominant as far as contribution to economy is concerned. Right. So if we try to understand this phenomena, in case of less developed economies, they do not have industries, they do not have adequate capital. So all what they can do is extract or utilize the resources as they are occurring naturally. But slowly, as capital accumulates, people become richer, companies become richer, the government becomes richer, industries start to develop, the people who are involved in the primary sector shift towards the developing sector, the manufacturing sector, right? So industry tends to become dominant. Now, as far as industry is concerned, these economies reach a point in which they reach a saturation. So for example, if you talk about USA, per capita ownership of automobiles is 800 out of 1,000 people. So out of 1,000 Americans, 800 have cars. So you can naturally imagine there is no incentive for producers to increase their outputs of automobiles in USA. In this case, industries stagnate, markets saturate, and people shift towards more of services. However, when you talk about India, this particular phase, that is the domination of the secondary sector, this never came in the development of our economy. We straight away shifted from lesser developed economy to, or rather, we straight away shifted from the dominance of primary sector to the tertiary sector. Now, the reasons of this particular phenomena are manifold. However, one major reason was that we've always been capital starved, or we've always had less capital as compared to other nations. Also, you can understand the secondary sector or the manufacturing sector requires considerable amount of capital investment for it to grow. That is something that we were not having, so we shifted more or focused more on the tertiary sector, for example, the information technology industry. Now, I'll be going through very recent government initiatives taken by the central government for each sector, including agriculture, manufacturing, and services. Now, APMC acts, these are laws which regulate how farmers get their produce to consumers. So this is a huge chain. If you want to understand this, farmers will go and accumulate their goods at selected places called mandis. And over here, retailers or shopkeepers will buy the produce by the farmers, and you as a consumer will purchase your food from the retailers. Now what we have been seeing in the past is, as far as this particular stage is concerned, it has a large number of problems. It has a large number of middlemen and intermediaries who are exploiting our poor farmers and giving them least possible compensation. So this particular act which regulates this process is being reviewed to make it more friendly for our farmers. One of the proposals in this case is that of contract farming. Now this will allow a farmer to directly sell his or her own goods to the customer. This is already in operation. So for example, a McDonald's or a KFC directly signs an agreement with the farmer. It provides with high quality seeds, high quality material, inputs, fertilizers, money, etc., and the farmer agrees to use his expertise and land, of course, to produce the kind of goods that they want. So the farmer is saved from this particular chain entirely. Otherwise, these are two recently launched AIBP and Krishi Sinchai Yojana. These have been launched for the benefit of farmers. Again, I recommend that you read a couple of lines on them, get a few facts. Again, the government is working towards providing good quality seeds, fertilizers and technology. Another important initiative is that of Kisan Credit Card, which allows our farmers to take loans using this particular card, and the Jan Dhan Yojana. This particular scheme, of course, is aimed towards financial inclusion and aims to open bank accounts for a large number of households in the country. It has been very successful. So it has opened approximately 19.6 crore accounts in the last 1.5 years since it has been launched in August 2014. So another important aspect of giving support to the agriculture sector involves microfinance. So microfinance is nothing but providing finances or loans, advances, etc. to majorly low income clients and the self-employed who traditionally lack access to banking and related services. As far as this particular section of the society is concerned, they are in need of small ticket size as far as finances is concerned. So perhaps a farmer would need 5,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees every year at the beginning of the harvest season or at the beginning of the sowing season. Now our traditional banks and other institutions are always apprehensive of extending loans to such farmers because, of course, farmers as a community is a very risky customer when you talk about our banks. They are risky because they are entirely dependent on weather phenomena. So other banks would be skeptical in extending loans to them. Over here, microfinancing institutions provide this service. In the last budget, the government announced the formation of Mudra Bank. This is Micro Units Development and Refinancing Agency. Mudra Bank. This is nothing but a refinancing agencies which will provide loans to other microfinancing institutions. Microfinance, further, the ticket size is less and the duration of these particular loans are quite less. Very importantly, loans are offered without collaterals or security. Now, it is very unlikely that a poor self-employed person, let us say, who wants to set up a business and needs 10,000 as the seed capital, would have any security or collateral. So over here, microfinancing institution extend these loans to such needy people. And of course, these loans are generally taken for income generation purposes. So they are not specific loans, for example, car loans, education loans. These are loans taken specifically for income generation. So when you talk about the government initiatives as far as industry is concerned, so in 1991, the Indian government took a major step of reforming our economy. So we introduced LPG, right? Liberalization, privatization and globalization related reforms. So we saw a large number of private sector, large number of industries being opened for the private sector. In terms of globalization, we allowed foreign capital in terms of FDI and FII to be invested in the country. So, and liberalization, so till then our trade barriers in terms of import duties were very high. We then after 1991 tried to reduce them. Again, as far as industry is concerned, the government is facilitating in terms of technology, research and development. So you will keep on finding this word in almost every economy related topic. So government is again improving the infrastructure in terms of railways and dedicated freight corridors. This is very important because there is a thumb rule. If you want to transport anything, any product to a distance which is greater than 250 kilometers, yes, so for it, if you have to transport or send a product more than 250 kilometers, then railways are the more cost effective of the as compared to roads. Again, India is taking many international collaborations. Our Prime Minister is visiting a large number of nations, too many if you ask the opposition, but still we need FDI, and Indian companies are acquiring large number of companies outside of the country as well. So as far as SMEs are concerned, small and medium enterprises, the government has initiated a large number of schemes to provide them with less interest loans. Again, this is a brief introduction regarding the economic reforms as they were initiated in 1991. So the dominance of the public sector in industrial activity was removed, their monopoly was removed. A large number of industrial activities, especially the commercial goods sector, was opened up for the private sector. So till then, the government enjoyed a large number of discretionary controls on industrial investment and capacity expansion. So if you had to set up a factory before 1991, you would go to the government to get a license. If you wanted to expand, or rather expand the capacity of your factory, again you would approach the government for a permission. Also, let us say if you're producing pens and now you wanted to produce pencils, or rather you wanted to change the product mix that you're producing, then again you had to approach the government. So there were large number of controls or regulations that existed. These were removed. As far as trade is concerned, the tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers were brought down to allow for India to import the things that it needs. Earlier we had limitations in terms of FDI and FIIs were not allowed. So as far under globalization, we opened our economies to both. Moving on with government initiatives as far to develop the industrial sector. So next very important initiative or campaign that the government of India has launched is that of Make in India. Its objective or the purpose is to encourage manufacturing in India by domestic as well as foreign entrepreneurs. So we are looking for FDI to be coming into our country, people setting up shop, setting up factories and producing goods in the country, as well as we are also encouraging domestic entrepreneurs to set up factories and create jobs in India. As far as its objective is concerned, it seeks to improve India's ease of doing business ranking. So what we are targeting is a rank which is below 50 in the ease of doing business by 2019. So as far as Make in India is concerned, there are 5 mechanisms that it is targeting. First is simplification of processes. So even till today, even after 91 reforms, we have, if I want to set up a factory or a shop in India, I have to approach a large number of departments to set up my business. So on an average, it takes about 30 to 40 days to start a business in the country, whereas in a country like Singapore, the process takes only 2 days. So these processes have to be simplified and controls should be lessened. Again, we come across this familiar term, infrastructure improvement is required. Third, skill development. Now we all have heard that India is short of doctors, engineers, etc. However, one more thing that we tend to forget is India is also falling short of workers like plumbers, carpenters, people who can operate heavy machinery in factories. So these people are also very important in the development of an economy. So as far as skill development is concerned, vocational training is also a focus of Make in India, and also we have another scheme running that is called Skill India. Make in India is focusing on 25 manufacturing sectors. These are certain sectors which our political leaders, our economic thinkers have felt that in which we have the potential of becoming top 10 in the world in the coming years. So only such sectors have been chosen to be focused upon. Again, India is attracting more and more FDI to get more and more capital. So for example, recently we increased the FDI limit to 49% in terms of defense production. Yes. So we came across this term, ease of doing business. This is a ranking which has been given by World Bank Group. It, as the name suggests, it describes the ease or difficulty in doing business in the country. Recently, India has been ranked 130 out of a total of 189 countries. Last year we were at 142, so we have shown a considerable jump. So the various areas which are looked at as far as ease of doing this business is concerned: regulation to start business, finances, property issues, taxes, legal ease, etc. So these are the factors which will decide the ease of doing business in a country. So moving on to the government initiatives for the services sector. First of all, FDI inflows. So recently, insurance sector FDI limits were increased to 49%. 49%. Please don't mind my handwriting. Digital India campaign. This is something that I'll be taking up in detail in some slides. Of course, we want to increase rural internet penetration. So, National Optic Fiber Network. This is providing high-speed broadband access to every village in the country. Right? Benchmarking by government companies in terms of quality of services that they are providing. Again, we are promoting tourism and extending e-tourist visa facilities to large number of countries, and most recently and importantly to China. Now let us discuss about Digital India. So this is an initiative by the Government of India. It is mainly concerned with creation of digital infrastructure like high-speed internet connections. Also, what it is targeting is delivery of services, especially the services given by the government in a digital mode, and as well as creating more and more awareness and literacy in terms of digital knowledge. So let us talk about the basic components of Digital India. Again, we want to create digital highways or broadband highways to provide high-speed internet connections which will allow people in our villages to access e-literacy campaigns, e-lectures, probably something similar to this one. Universal access to mobile connectivity. Now, as of now, we are already, as per the recent data by TRAI, already India has more than 1 billion mobile users. Public internet access programs, of course, we want to extend the benefits of internet or connectivity to all sections of the society. Then e-governance, that is reforming government through technology. So we want to get over the red tapeism, the bureaucracy of the governments of moving hard copied files and let the government make the government function on digital platforms. E-Kranti is related to electronic delivery of services. So for example, the exams that you take, for example the CAT, you filled up the form online and the exam is conducted online. So these are some things, electronic delivery of services. Also, if you want to apply to the passport, for example in Chandigarh, it is very easy now because everything is online. Information for all. Now as far as the right to information is concerned, one of the clauses was to make the information public without the public asking for it. Now only using digital formats it is possible. So scanned copies of all important government documents can be put up on their websites. Of course, one aspect of manufacturing that India is really lagging behind is electronics goods. So over here also Digital India focuses on. It wants to create, Digital India will also aim to create professionals for IT jobs in terms of their training and including their early harvest programs, that is catching the people young in terms of knowledge of information technology and upgradation of Indian information technology sector. Yes. Moving on, let us try and understand the concept of foreign direct investments. So if a foreign company or a foreign headquartered company comes into the country and invests for a long term, for example sets up a factory, that is known as foreign direct investments. Opposingly, there is foreign institutional investments. So these are foreigners or people based outside of the country which invest only for a short term only in the financial markets of the country. So let us say if the share market is down for some reason, FIIs will come in, purchase a large number of shares. When the share market does go up, then they will remove or take away that money. So naturally, FII is not a very reliable source of foreign exchange because they can take out their money in a very easy manner. Next, and this is related to a question which was asked to me earlier, the debate related to growth versus development. Now, economic growth is a narrower concept as compared to economic development. Economic growth is a objective concept, that is you measure growth in numbers, 8%, 9%, 10%. However, when you talk about economic development, it is related to standard of living. Standard of living of people, right? So it is obviously, economic growth is a part of standard of living, so it is a much broader concept when you compare it to economic growth. Now the idea is how to measure such a broad concept. So this idea, so we use a concept called HDI or Human Development Index. Every year the United Nations Development Program brings out ranking of nations in terms of HDI, right? So it has 3 indicators which are measured and on the basis of which HDI is calculated. First of course is indicators related to health. So over here you will find average age expectancy in a country, education, right? So this will include certain literacy measures and of course income, in which GNP or per capita is taken. So you can see HDI is a more comprehensive concept to ensure that the development is affecting all sections of the society, or the benefits of economic growth are being percolated to even the lowest sections of the society. Okay, next important concept is of course related to inflation. It is a rise in the general level of prices of goods and services in economy over a period of time. So there are 3 types of inflations. First is demand pull, second is cost push, and third is structural inflation. Structural inflation. Now, of course, when the demand of a particular good rises rapidly, it causes a rise in prices or inflation. Such an inflation is known as demand pull inflation. When the raw material cost or the cost of inputs rises, for example, the cost of oil, if it rises, then of course travel becomes expensive. You see inflation in travel rates. So that is called cost push inflation. And then structural inflation is related to lack of infrastructure in the country. So that example that we took earlier, if you're transporting goods to over 250 kilometers, if you're using roads, then you're taking in extra costs, and of course this will contribute to inflation. That is known as structural inflation. So very briefly, we'll talk about what monetary policy is all about. In detail, this will be covered in detail in the lecture related to banking sector. So monetary policy is a policy that the RBI makes to control the money supply in the economy. So money supply is nothing but the money that is circulating in the economy. So you can very well imagine, if the money supply increases, that is money in our pockets, on people's pockets increases, demand will increase, which will lead to increase in prices or inflation. So if the inflation is very high and the RBI wants to control it, it will reduce money supply using its various tools of monetary policy and lead to reduction in prices or controlling inflation. Right guys, that brings us to the end of this particular presentation. So I'll take questions now. Okay, the question is why 250 kilometers? So if you're using a railway transport for a distance which is less than 250 kilometers, it ends up being very high due to economies of scale, right? So if you're obviously sending a large amount of goods over very long distances, if you're using roads, using trucks, cargo transporters, etc., that becomes expensive when you compare it to railways. Okay, I apologize, I'll answer the question again. I'm sorry. So the question is why 250 kilometers in terms of railway and road. So this is a concept related to economies of scale. Naturally, if you're transporting a large amount of goods, however the distance is less than 250 kilometers, then railways will be more expensive to you as compared to roads. And if the distance is greater than 250 kilometers and you are transporting a large number of goods using a number of trucks, if the distance exceeds 250 kilometers, then railways is a better option. So this is nothing but a thumb rule. Yes, any other question before we end this lecture? Any other question, guys? Yes, Ankur, this video will be available on YouTube as well. Ankur, no issues. I guess you can view this video online. This will be put up on YouTube on our on our official channel, that is Hit Bullseye. Okay, Ishan, as far as LPG is concerned, the L stands for liberalization, P stands for privatization, right? So as far as P is concerned, earlier before 1991, the government sector enjoyed monopoly over the industrial sector. That is, private sector was not allowed to, let us say, produce steel in the country, right? However, after 1991, it was decided that private sector, if they have the capability, skills and the money, they can invest in or start manufacturing in the country as well. As far as globalization is concerned, globalization is nothing but coming together of all world economies. So we allowed foreign companies, for example US companies, to come and invest in India. Earlier we were putting restrictions on them. Divya, how RBI controls the money supply, that will be covered in a separate presentation or separate lecture that is banking sector and related issues in India. You can note down my email IDs as well, but guys, only academic related queries, right? So don't ask me which college is better, how should I fill out the form. For that we have separate experts, right? So my email ID is Ankur Chaudhary, ANKUR. I'll just write it down, wait a minute. ANKUR CHOUDHARY 01 at gmail.com. That's Ankur Chaudhary 01 at gmail.com. Okay, I guess we have no more questions. So thank you so much for attending this live e-lecture, right? Thank you.